Alright, so in terms of how I'm handling this one, this is going to be a bit different, because really this is just me talking in front of the microphone, again, without a script, even though I do have a set of notes in front of me, because I'm going to talk about Skills 2.0 again. I've talked about Skills 2.0 in the past. I've even had a 2-hour-long discussion with it with another Payday YouTuber, which, not a lot of people checked out, but it was actually a very enlightening conversation to have about Skills 2.0, primarily with where the problems are and what can be done to fix them in a way. So after that conversation, I decided to look at Skills 2.0 in depth and basically take as many notes as I could and see what it is that I would change in it, in every single respect. So, first thing I should probably talk about is what the problems themselves are. The issues about Skills 2.0 primarily boil down to 3 things, but they all kind of gel together in one big blob. First thing is, weapons apparently don't hold enough ammo overall, but the bigger issue with that, I find, is the existence of the stockpile skills really not needing to be there, especially for weapons like shotguns and sniper rifles, because those are never ammo negative unless you just cannot aim. So having stockpile on them and other throwables like frag grenades and flash grenades, you don't need them, so I'm going to provide alternatives to get rid of those without ruining having more things on each tree. The other issue is not really having any reason to side climb, because a lot of things just don't gel together, like one of the biggest examples of this being the professional page, which has hostage trading next to sniper rifles, which is next to ammo bags. How do these gel together? Simple, they don't, which is why nobody side climbs on the professional skill page. So that's something else I want to address. So I will be trying to move around a few of the trees around these pages, but not too much, to try and make it so that some things actually do gel together a bit better. And the last thing is some skills being way too specific to weapon types, because there are some skills that would be really nice to have on other weapons, like quick draw on the handgun tree would be really nice to have on other weapons, especially ones you like to ADS with, but it's locked to handguns, and that's just very aggravating, and there are multiple examples of this. So I'm going to be going over those, but, I gotta do this in order. So I'll be doing page by page, separating this into each category. So whichever one you're more interested in, go ahead and click the chapter. I'll be making sure to edit that in. So without further ado, so I've already talked about the Juggernaut tree in one of my previous videos, actually. So some of these are going to be going over what I said in that video already, but, consolidating it into a much more concise video talking about all of the skills at once. Starting with Extra Protection Ace, the skill currently is well, I'll be changing the ace, but for every point of trauma on your current armor plate, gain 0.1 damage reduction for every skill equipped in the Juggernaut branch, which really does not make any sense. Like, you are not going to care about how much more damage deduction you get when you're almost about to break your armor plate anyway, especially if you're running something like 1 or 2 plate resistant. So instead of having that word salad of something that you're not going to care about, I'd rather make that. So my change would be changing Extra Protection Ace to repair 1 point of trauma on kill for every 2 points equipped in the Juggernaut branch. And, keep the description of what trauma damage is, because, new players probably need that. This is something that would make it so that even if you're running 1 plate resistant, it's not impossible to maintain it so long as you build around that. It's also something that keeps this skill tree universal, because this is one of the only skill trees in the game that any build can realistically take, because every build is going to have armor. No matter what you do, you're going to have some form of armor. So that's why I want to make it that any build can use this, and it's something that could also be generally useful and promote more armor diversity instead of just impact. Moving on to Headguard. I've talked about this skill before, and how the problem with the skill is when you get heavy armor layouts, where the least cooldown you can get with a 4-plate, say you're running 4-plate resistant, you have a 4-second cooldown. What is a 0.6 second cooldown reduction going to matter when that's the armor type you're running? It's not going to matter, because you're getting shot again before it regenerates. So either change it so that the cooldown is reduced until after it regenerates, or what I've written down here. Headshot kills reduce armor regen time by 0.2 seconds for every armor plate equipped until your armor regenerates. A possible thing to add into it to make adaptive work more properly as well is adding in the old plate up effect to it. So long as your current armor plate is not an impact armor plate, headshot kills will instantly generate your current armor plate. I would put that as the ace ability because, it's a pretty powerful thing, especially if you're running high cooldown armor. Especially if you're running adaptive, which is kind of what you're supposed to run it with. Armored up 1 ace, I have one small note for this. It's because armor bags with both Armored Up 1 and Armored Up 1 Ace only gain 5 more charges, so I would just change the Ace to be 3 charges instead of 2, so that it has the 4 extra charges like every other deployable. Beast of Burden fundamentally is not a bad skill, but there's one thing that I think would add a lot more intuitiveness to using it, which is adding a You Now Bag loot 40% faster to either the base or aced skill. Which, it doesn't really... I don't use this that much, and I don't really care that much about it. It would be nice to have it as a benefit of the base skill, but it could just be the effect of acing it, like you bag and secure loot much more quickly. Armored Up 2 Ace, this one is basically just a change that I would make to armor and ammo bags overall. Instead of once you deploy it, it is once you use your first free charge of the bag, it has the effect of fully restoring armor for people within 10 meters. Including yourself, because, you gotta add that little disclaimer, because otherwise people will think, well, why would I use it if it doesn't affect me? Because it does. The biggest thing in Juggernaut is just some tweaking of what's already there, because none of it is bad, it just needs a little bit of adjusting. Moving on to Commando, the Assault Rifle and LMG tree. I am going to be removing Stockpile. So, to accommodate for that, in Rifleman, the base skill, I am going to add a new ability to it. For every skill equipped in the Commando branch, Assault Rifles and LMGs hold 5% more ammo. If you get every single possible skill in the tree, that is a maximum of 60% more ammo, which is not as much as Stockpile would give you, but let's also be realistic here. The LMG with Stockpile, and I'm also pretty sure combined with 4-plate, can hold over 1,000 bullets. I don't think you're going to be using 1,000 bullets in a single heist. You don't need to hold that many. So, 5% for each skill equipped in the Commando tree will give you more than enough ammo than you need for assault rifles. Nothing else about the skill needs to change. Stockpile Assault.
Yeah, I know I must look pretty bad in here, but this useless...
Stockpile.
I suppose I'll have to... get rid of it.
So because Stockpile is a skill that's going to be completely removed, at least with my proposals, I'm going to replace it with a skill called Suppressive Fire. For each hit that does not penetrate an enemy's armor, gain a 1% chance to stagger an enemy. This bonus ends when you reload or swap weapons, and the ace is reload assault rifles and LMGs while sprinting. I did add a little note here of the base and ace skills can be switched depending on how players feel about that, which I will leave to you guys in the comments section below, because both of these are good things. It's just a question of which one should be the more expensive one. That's really the big thing. And then slight change to focus fire, change the accuracy, increase to recoil reduction, and remove the assault rifle and LMG limitation. Being rewarded for hitting your shots more accurately with a more stable weapon is not something that should be limited to assault rifles. It makes sense that you would get that from the assault rifle tree, but it shouldn't be a thing that you can only get from assault rifles. Which is just my problem with a lot of the skills in general. I'm not going to make every single skill universal. That would be ridiculous, because ammo funnel and replenish, I don't want to make that a thing that every weapon can use. That would just be, that would just repeat history, and I don't want to do that. Last skill tree on the soldier page is Grenadier. So, keeping with the trend of removing Stockpile, gotta put it somewhere else, and I'm using Knife Expert as the baseline for how I'm changing it in almost pretty much all of these trees. So, Bombs Away base. For every skill equipped in the Grenadier tranche, frag grenades deal 7.5% more damage. That's staying as is, but it is adding, also carry one more frag grenade for every 2 skills equipped in the Grenadier branch. That should probably be the ace, actually. Considering you need 2 skills to even get there, yeah, that should be the ace one. But either way, you get that, and then if you max out the entire tree, you can carry up to 6 more frag grenades, which is much better than what stockpile is. Speaking of stockpile, frag grenades,
Get rid of it.
I'm going to replace this version of stockpile with a tweaked human resources, because I get why it exists, but I don't think it should be in the hostage tree. Having it be in the frag grenade skill tree makes a lot more sense for that, because really the only other throwable that you're going to kill a hostage with is either the smoke grenade, only if you get the poisonous gas skill, and throwing knives. The only thing that this is really applicable to if you're not deliberately killing civs is frag grenades. So why would it not be in the frag grenade skill tree? But anyway, the base version I'm going to change a little bit. So base version of human resources is your throwables do not affect hostages. That part is staying. The ace version, though, is sort of a way to bring back the shield ability to keep yourself from damaging yourself with your own throwables, where I've written, if your throwable would harm or debuff you, you instead remain unaffected. Which basically means you don't get harmed by your own frag grenades, and you don't get blinded by your own flash grenades, you don't get stunned by, you don't get blinded by smoke grenades, and all that. The last thing I have notes for on the Grenadier tree is sudden impact, which is, impact grenades are fun, but so is cooking grenades. But having the impact version be the easier way to handle it, I think is also a good way to go about it. So that's why I've slightly changed sudden impact a bit. Instead of it being when it explodes by colliding with an enemy dealing additional 40% damage, it doesn't deal that additional 40% damage if it hits the ground. So that way you don't need to ace it, and you can have a skill ceiling, or you can have a skill floor, to where you cook the grenade and have it blow up in midair, like behind a shield, so you can actually get that bonus 40% damage that way without needing to have it always be impact, because, that opens up even more gameplay styles without needing to limit anything. But yeah, overall, a lot of what I've changed in Soldier is just some tweaks and making things better. And, starting the trend of, let's get rid of stockpile, period. It's not good. Moving on to the ninja page, let's start with the ghost tree. This one, I only have 2 that I would change, which are Judo Chop, because it's stupid, it sucks, it doesn't need to exist. The only thing good about it is, hey, you gotta examine the victim, which can just so much more easily be moved to a stealth-centered tree. Like, there's no reason not to. So, Judo Chop. I have changed it to, if your dodge chance is 20% or higher, move 10% faster. Which is basically just emphasizing getting more dodge, because, Judo Chop is in the dodge this tree. So, it's in the tree where the base skill is get more dodge. So it's got to have some kind of synergy with dodge. And then the ace version, it's still got to have some melee aspects. So if your dodge chance is 30% or higher, your quick melee will always stagger a SWAT or heavy SWAT. This does not affect dozers. It's a way to quickly get yourself out of a crowd if you really need to leave as soon as possible. And it's also a good way to synergize with multitasker aced, where you quick melee somebody to instantly reload your SMG. And the only other thing I would change is on the run aced, because I'm also moving the shoot and reload weapons while sprinting to something else. So that kind of means the ace of on the run doesn't need to exist. So the base skill is while sprinting or sliding, and for 2 seconds afterward, your dodge chance increases by 25%. So I would change on the run ace to raising that dodge chance increase to 25% and increasing your sprinting speed while masked up by 10%. It's a pretty simple way to do it. It's emphasizing the speed aspect of that skill. It's not really much else to say about it. It's just those 2 skills in particular were not really necessary. Everything else is pretty alright. Special Ops. This is the SMG skill tree. So, keeping with trend of removing stockpile, gotta replace it with something else, and SMGs are notoriously one of the most ammo-negative weapons in the game. So this one, let's look at SMG Adept momentarily. For every skill equipped in the Special Ops branch, SMGs deal 2% additional damage to enemy armor. The thing I'm changing with this is also holds 7.5, not 75, that's ridiculous, 7.5% more SMG ammo for every skill equipped in the Special Ops branch. Which basically means... It basically means you can hold up to 90% more ammunition depending how many SMG skills you max out. So, and then the Ace version, because SMG spread is not really that useful because because if you're ADSing, spread doesn't matter, and if you're close range, spread doesn't matter that much either. So I would change the Ace version to that being how you shoot and reload SMGs while sprinting or sliding instead of on the run aced. And then Stockpile SMG.
Get rid of it.
This one I'm going to replace with a more original skill called Mag Number. This one will reduce maximum hipfire spread by 10%, and the Ace version says, the more bullets you hit a single enemy within hipfire, each hit will deal an additional 1% damage until you reload or swap weapons up to a maximum of 15%. Which basically really emphasizes using hipfire and being really close, especially since with SMGs you're going to mag dump all the time. But this is also another case of the skill is not specific to SMGs, so it can be used with other weapons. Multitasker. I have nothing wrong with the base skill, that one's fine, but, you know, I'm sort of repeating myself from my older video with what I changed with the Ace skill. Perform a quick melee on an enemy to instantly reload your weapon. This skill has a cooldown of 8 seconds on SMGs and handguns, which is what I would add to it, because SMGs and handguns kind of go hand in hand because they're very similar weapon archetypes. And a cooldown equal to magazine capacity on other weapons. Like, you know, you have a 20-round mag on... Like, you have the compact mag on an assault rifle, you do the quick melee with that, you have to wait 20 seconds to reload with that weapon via quick melee again. Or, you know, like the example I used last time, the LMG. It has 100 bullets. You need to wait 100 seconds to reload it with a quick melee again. And lastly, the only other thing I have from the Special Ops tree that I would change is Steady Hands. And that is simply swapping the placement with the new Mag Number skill, because an accuracy buff should not be tier 3. Also, similarly to how I said to change Focus Fire, I would also say to change Hipfire accuracy to Hipfire spread reduction and ADS accuracy to recoil reduction, because the way it's currently described is just kind of weird and not really fitting. Alright, last thing in Special Ops, I know I probably said last thing earlier, but, you know, whatever. The last thing in the Special Ops tree is SM Genius. After looking this over a bit, and in the middle of editing actually, I wanted to go over this skill as well to change it, because as it is, it requires way too much ammo dumping to actually make use out of, because as it is, when you reload an empty magazine that's the only time you can get a damage buff with SMGs, and that's not fun. So, instead, I'm going to change it to, for every hit you land with an SMG, gain a 1% increase in damage with SMGs up to a maximum of 40% as the base skill. This buff will diminish over time after 5 seconds of not firing your weapon, or whenever you miss, by 1%, similarly to how the assault rifle skills are with their accuracy bonuses. And the Ace increases the maximum damage bonus to 80, and it can now be refreshed by reloading. Which is basically just to keep the spirit of what SM Genius is trying to do, without needing to spend 400 bullets just to reach that maximum damage cap. Which is just, at that point you're out of ammo. You don't want that to happen. Last on the ninja tree is Fog Machine, the smoke grenade tree. So, starting with Heavy Smoker Ace, this one I am going to also carry one additional smoke grenade for every 2 skills equipped in the Fog Machine branch, because, you know, you already know what's going to happen to stockpile smoke grenades.
Get rid of it.
This one is going to be another unique skill called Fog Lights. If an enemy is caught in your smoke grenade in the first 3 seconds that it goes off, they are rendered blind and will not fire for 5 seconds or until they leave the smoke. This does not affect dozers and naders. And that's the base skill, because really, why do we need a stockpile? And it's also a case of getting an enemy caught in your smoke grenade. You know, it's like when you see Batman throwing a smoke grenade at the ground. Nobody can tell where he is, and they can't even hit him because they have no idea where they're shooting. He's probably already long gone once the smoke clears. And it also makes you feel more like an actual ninja. And the Ace version is just a buff to that. The time that an enemy can be pacified in the smoke grenade is increased to 5 seconds, and they are unable to fire for 10 seconds once affected by your smoke grenade. Nothing else that I would really change on that skill page, though. Moving on to mechanic, this is the skill page with turrets, shotguns, and shot grenades. So, I actually don't have any notes for the turret tree, so that one can just stay as is. Even, I am recording this before the latest patch where they're going to cap it at 175% damage, but even with that, I don't think there should be any more changes to the turret tree, because it's fine as it is. However, I cannot say the same for shotgunner, so stockpile shotgun.
Get rid of it.
I also wrote, and don't put it on the tier 1 skill, considering all shotguns besides the M7 are always ammo neutral at worst. Alright, so I changed a couple things around in the edit that I want to just clarify really quickly. I changed the shotgunner tree because I initially wanted, what was the original skill it was called? I wanted to have calling shotgun in the shotgunner tree be where sprint reload was put, but looking over it again, I kind of realized it'd be better to have that on speedloader. So I changed speedloader from what I initially drafted it as. This is the modified version of speedloader that's going to replace stockpile shotgun. For each hit on an enemy, your next reload is 2.5% faster, up to a maximum of 70% on shotguns, and up to a maximum of 50% on other weapons. And the ace is reload and fire shotguns while sprinting. I'm mostly moving the shoot and reload shotguns while sprinting off of Berserker because it should not be a tier 4 skill to have that kind of quality of life thing. I mean, sure, firing them while sprinting, maybe, but reloading while sprinting, absolutely not. So that's why I'm moving it to a tier 2 skill instead. Plus, it also makes it feel a lot better when comparing it to another tree like Soldier, where I've added a reload while sprinting skill to assault rifles on tier 2 as well. Anyway, let's see what I'm replacing speedloader with, because I'm moving it from tier 3 to tier 2. I'm replacing speedloader, the original speedloader, with collateral control. If you break a special's weak point, like a Zapper's Battery or Nader Belt, only enemies are affected by it. And then the ace version is just making you completely immune to any stagger effects. Aside from things like cloakers and Zappers actually actually stunning you, and, the dozer. And the dozer. But other than that, you would be immune to anything that would stagger you, which would pair exceptionally well with turrets, because you have no idea how often turrets will just say, haha, I don't need to aim for the head, I'm going to shoot the nader belt and stun you 5 times in a row because 5 naders just walked in the door. That's not fun to go through, so I just make it so that if you really want to use turrets, you can also just make it that you don't have to deal with that. Anyway, last tier 2 skill, Point Blank. I'm going to remove the shotgun restricted, but it's still going to be more potent with shotguns. So the description now reads, deal 10% additional damage to enemies within 5 meters. This damage bonus is doubled with shotguns. And the ace version raises it to 25%, and it's still damage bonus is still doubled with shotguns. Very simple to understand. It's just a very close range damage buff. And Berserker I'm changing a good bit, except for Berserker, I'm changing the ace effect, because the base is, while reloading a shotgun and for 2.5 seconds afterward, you take 50% less damage from enemies within 8 meters, which is pretty much just the ace effect of what it is now. And now the new ace effect is, if you kill an enemy within 1 second of reloading a shotgun, all enemies within 8 meters have a 50% chance to become heavily staggered. This does not affect dozers. Because I want to bring back the original Shock and Awe skill. That was one I actually found a lot of fun and use out of, and I feel like it's one that should come back, because it's one that really emphasizes the run and gun, get close into somebody's face, and then bam, you kill them in one shot, and suddenly it's like, oh, no! Kind of like a Terminator scene. Lastly, on the mechanic page is shot grenades. I don't use these much, so I did have to get some other ideas in here for these, but shock factor, ace, this one's pretty simple because it's similar to the other throwables by now. For every skill equipped in the electrician branch, the electricity from shock grenades bounces 1 additional time. That's the current skill. Adding on to that, also carry 1 additional shock grenade for every 2 skills equipped in the electrician branch, because you know what's happening to stockpile shock grenades.
Get rid of it.
I'm replacing this with Shock and Awe, not the old Shock and Awe, a new Shock and Awe. Shock grenades will now mark affected enemies. Ace version, if a shock grenade affects 3 or more enemies, it will split into 3 smaller shock grenades that pulse twice. Which is basically rewarding you for hitting a large crowd with shock grenades, and also synergizing with marking, if you really want to spec into that. And while yes, you could say that this somewhat takes away from flash grenades and smoke grenades being marking things, I think it would make the least amount of sense if frag grenades had a marking ability, because I tried doing that way back when with Skills 1.0, and it did not work that well. It was funny when it did work, but it's not something that should have worked. I don't want frag grenades to have marking, but shock grenades having marking isn't something that shouldn't be a thing. Or, yeah, shock grenades being able to mark enemies is something that should be a thing anyway. Lastly, renewable energy aced. This one is somewhat alright, but I'm focusing mostly on the ace skill, because destroying a zapper's battery or landmine restores one shock grenade is what it is now, and that's a little bit too limiting for what you can, for how often you'll be able to get those, unless you're running something like Cook-Off. Which is why I'm changing it to be destroying a zapper's battery or landmine restores 2 shock grenades, and killing a zapper will just restore 1, so that it's a lot more forgiving and you can still use shock grenades more consistently. I guess you could change it to making it so that killing a zapper has a 50% chance to restore a shock grenade, but either way, it should be a lot more rewarding when you're going after a very specific spot on a zapper to get your shock grenades back. So, moving on to the hacker page, this is where I'm going to start rearranging some of the skill trees on the pages. So, because of that, I'm going to also rename this hacker page into Infiltrator, because this skill page has Black Hat, Puppet Master, and Ammo Specialist. You have tools that help mark things, ammunition that I'm going to change to have a bigger focus on throwables, and human and hostage skills, because this would be much more of a utility skill page rather than something that would really be heavily useful when you're trying to use handguns, which is not exactly what it should be. Starting with Black Hat, though, I'm repeating myself from my old video, but change playback ace to also be change the playback ace effect. A playback ace allows you to spend 1 runtime to make a hacked camera automatically mark all guards or law enforcement within range. I am adding the ability to use that on your micro cameras, and also adding a little thing that micro cameras are not affected by the Cerberus Core modifier. They still take away from your maximum runtimes, but they're not going to be reset after 5 seconds by its current Cerberus Core, which is just... I hate Cerberus Core, but I've talked about that before, so... Yeah, otherwise, playback ace works the same. It's just allow it to be used on microcam so that they can actually be used in stealth and or loud. So I do have a small change to Pump the Jam ace. This is mostly to circumvent something that really doesn't need to exist, and that's the ace version of Pump the Jam. If your starting loadout contains ECM jammers, receive 1 additional ECM jammer. It's just a skill that says get 1 more tool, which is only applicable to a specific tool, and is not useful for something like motion sensors or microcams. And there's also the fact that the 2-plate armor passive exists, which just gives you an extra tool anyway. So there's no reason to keep it. Instead, I'd replace it with the description is basically full recall from the old system, but you can pick up a place tool so long as it hasn't been used after placement. That is what I would change the ace effect of Pump the Jam to, because that's infinitely more useful than just getting 1 more ECM jammer. High marks. This is a skill that I'm going to move to the flashpoint tree, so I'm going to replace it with something else entirely, called ECM Rush. Whenever an ECM jammer is active, your hacking attempts, phone searches, and QR code interactions are 50% faster, and guard radios are answered automatically. This is somewhat bringing back an old skill, I don't remember the name of it, but I'll put it on screen right now, where ECMs did exactly that. The aced version is also bringing back an old skill because, moving skills around got to replace the ones that don't exist now with something else. Cameras within 0.5 meters of ECM jammers you own are disabled. This effect starts when the ECM jammer is placed and lasts until the ECM jammer is removed or used up. Disabled cameras can no longer move automatically, and any runtime uses on disabled cameras do not count toward your total runtimes. Which basically really heavily rewards using ECMs to block cameras until you use them up, which also lets you use them. And also because ECMs do have their own use case specifically in No Rest for the Wicked, where you can use them to delay the die packs going off, which is how you can effectively do it solo, getting max value out of all the loot. Unfortunately, that's the only way to do it, but, I made a video about that a while ago. So, yeah. Either way, there's not really much else to change here, because since I'm moving Highmark somewhere else, got to replace it with another skill, and it might as well be one that makes ECMs more useful. After all, this is the hacking and ECM tree, so, Puppet Master. Human Resources has been moved to Grenadier, so it's got to be replaced with something else, so I'm going to call that CQC Specialist. And this is going to be a way to bring back a couple Human Shield skills from the original system. Move 20% faster while holding a Human Shield is the base skill. And the Ace version is if you're using a SWAT as a Human Shield, shove them away to repair your current armor plate. This effect only triggers once per SWAT. This is a way to bring back soft assets, which is, it's a skill that a lot of people love, and it's very particular in how it goes about things. And it makes a lot more sense to have it on a skill tree where you already have scare tactics, which lets you take a SWAT as hostage. But it also feels a lot better when it's not stuck next to sniper rifles where you're killing large groups and staying away from everything anyway, which just does not synergize all that well. And Insurance Plan, the ace, the final skill of Puppet Master, because I actually don't really have that much of an issue with the Tier 1 and Tier 2 skills of the Puppet Master tree. So, Insurance Plan, I am changing this to your crew gains a 3% damage reduction for every tied hostage within 15 meters, capping at 50%. Multiple instances of the skill will not stack. But I'm primarily changing the aced version. Whenever you're downed and within a 15 meters of a civilian, they will try and reach you to revive you. The hostage will become intangible and flee once you are revived. This is a way to bring back Stockholm Syndrome from the original system, where you could basically yell at a civilian to try and free you if you got downed or cuffed. And, they would do that if they could reach you. This is sort of bringing that back, and it's a Tier 4 skill because, of course, something that lets you get yourself back up should be a Tier 4 skill. That's something I don't think anybody would complain about because it would give people a reason to keep hostages around as an actual insurance plan. Wink, wink. I'm sorry, I will not do that again. Lastly, on the rearranged hacker or infiltrator page is Ammo Specialist, which is the ammo bag tree. So, Munitions Expert Ace, I am changing the throwable restoration from for every two skill points for every singular skill point. For every singular skill equipped. Because I want ammo, because ammo bags are not going to be that useful for restoring ammo. And they never have been, honestly. The best thing ammo bags have gotten with Skills 2.0 is their ability to restore throwables, so I want them to lean more heavily into that. Which is why I'm changing it so that they restore even more throwables, especially with the removal of stockpile and replacement with effectively Knife Expert, but for every other throwable, you'll be able to carry a lot more anyway. But, Tier 2 and Tier 3 skills, those are fine. Utility Belt is also fine because it just lets you carry more throwables, which especially if you're using Black Hat and Puppet Master for a stealth build, Utility Belt for even more throwing knives is also really good if you don't want to run 3-plate. But Bullet Frenzy, on the other hand, complete rework. Once a heister interacts with your ammo bag, they deal 50% more damage with the next magazine of their primary and secondary weapons. Which is basically just their next magazine is going to have a lot more energy behind it because they refilled it with your ammunition. Aced is where it gets interesting, though. Once a heister interacts with your ammo bag, they gain unlimited use of their throwables for 10 seconds. This is similar to a skill that I've seen used in Payday 2, and was used to very fun extents, but, this is limited to throwables on the Tier 3 skill, because ammo bags are already niche enough. So let's make the niche even more fun for the people that do use them, is kind of my mentality behind this. And then Premium Bag, changing this one to be similar to Armored Up 2, where the first use of an ammo bag is free. When you use this free ammo bag charge, all heisters within 5 meters regain their I've changed from 2 throwables to their maximum throwable capacity, including yourself. Aced version. Once a heister interacts with your ammo bag, they gain unlimited ammo for 10 seconds. This is something that's not going to be useful to everything, but it would be very useful for something like the Mamba grenade launcher, or SMGs, or assault rifles, or even the LMG. Where it's like, you have infinite ammo. You might as well, you're bringing ammo give people a reason to spend their ammo. That's kind of the biggest mentality with the ammo bags, and I want them to actually have a use for it, because if you're speccing into offense that much, you may as well have a really good offense, right? Moving on to the Conman page. This one is another one where I'm rearranging things. So Conman is going to have the Imposter skill tree come next to Hitman and Flashpoint. The main reason I'm doing this is because Imposter is a skill tree that is mainly centered around adrenaline and stealth. Like, it has some stealth skills, and it's also primarily focused around adrenaline. And with the reworks to the skills, I'm going to be trying to focus it more on getting speed as a reward for keeping your adrenaline. So that being something next to Hitman, which has spatial awareness, which gives you adrenaline, is something that pairs really well, and again, incentivizes side climbing, which is kind of the main goal of a lot of these changes. And Imposter is also just a skill tree that needs a lot of work anyway. Starting in Imposter, I have changed every single skill in the Imposter tree except for Adrenaline Junkie, because that one's fine. The base skill just gives you more adrenaline the more skills you have, and the Ace one is just a free way of getting adrenaline and stealth. So, Thrill Seeker Aced. Whenever you have adrenaline... Yeah, Thrill Seeker base is fine, because when you're unmasked, your adrenaline no longer decreases. That's fine. Maybe change it so that it decreases 50% slower. But the Ace version, whenever you have adrenaline, you will move faster proportionally to the amount of adrenaline you have. The speed bonus cannot exceed 20%. So it's like if you have 20 adrenaline, then you will move 20% faster. If you have 50 adrenaline, you can't move more than 20% faster with that adrenaline speed buff, which can make you move really fast if you got a bunch of stuff combined. Like, especially if you're combining it with some of the stuff in Ghost, this would let you move extremely quickly, especially in stealth, which would be very fun to do as sort of a high, like, it's a high effort to maintain, but when you do maintain it, it feels exceptionally good. Plain Sight. This one is pretty simple. I'm combining the base and ace skills into cameras and employees detect you 35% slower while you have adrenaline. And the ace version is basically gain 10 adrenaline whenever you begin getting detected by a guard. This is a way to get adrenaline primarily when you're masked up, but also not a way to get it when you're out of stealth, because that's primarily what it's for. It is a stealth speed buff, similar to how Rush worked in Skills 1.0, because that was a fun thing to maintain at times, when it's like, you can move faster in stealth by playing skillfully, and just not getting caught. Which is, you know, it's a fun thing to play around, especially in a stealth system like this one. Moving on to Tier 3, there's Hall Pass. This one is just a simple change. It's really just making sure that it has the same conditionals as everything else. Instead of while you are unmasked, it is while you are unmasked and have adrenaline. Cameras will not detect you performing illegal actions. And the same thing goes for Ace, where you're unmasked, employees won't detect you performing illegal actions. Except, you know, you gotta have adrenaline to make it actually work now. Which, you know, that's something that I feel like that's how it should have been in the first place. Moving on to Strong Armed, though, I feel like I'm not alone in saying that being able to use throwables while unmasked is so insanely powerful that it cannot be the base skill. It has to be the ace version so that you at least spend a significant amount of skill points to get there. So the base version, I'm going to change to, you are no longer restricted in your movement options while carrying bodies, and throw bags 50% farther. Which basically means you can now more reliably hide bodies in the vents without needing to resort to using a shotgun to abuse the ragdoll physics. So you can crouch, jump, and sprint while you holding bodies, you know, jumping assuming you're masked up. Which, I mean, you have to move you can only move a body when you're masked up anyway, so I don't even know why I specified that. But the ace version is, you know, that's what the original base version is, where you can use throwables while unmasked. This is considered an illegal action. Because of just how strong it is, it needs to be the ace version. But also the primary changes with things like Thrill Seeker and also Seeing Red. Because I want adrenaline to be useful in Loud as well, where as long as you have adrenaline, you just have more movement speed, and you can also, like, you can gain adrenaline and speed from dodging. So they synergize very well together despite being on different pages. But it's also just a thing of, you know, you want to use these together. You want to have adrenaline. I want adrenaline to actually have a use besides just being not Rush. Even though it is just being Rush, except for Loud now. Which is more, it's more than it has now, but still. Point is, adrenaline should be more than just the replacement for rush in stealth and only stealth. Anyway, changes to seeing red. Your adrenaline degrades 5% slower for each skill equipped in the imposter branch, which is useful for both stealth and loud, but mostly for stealth because you don't want it to go lower. If you have any amount of adrenaline, you can use first aid kits to pause the degradation for 20 seconds. And the aced version is, while you have adrenaline, gain a 5% damage bonus for every skill equipped in the imposter branch, which is basically what the aced version of the skill already is, except without the base version giving you the 2% for every skill equipped in the imposter branch. Because it's better to have something that keeps your adrenaline around than something that gives you a damage buff for your adrenaline, when most of the skill tree is centered around stealth. Moving on to the next skill tree, Hitman, because I am making this more synergistic because I'm trying to make imposters synergize with Hitman and Flashpoint. I'm changing Bullseye Ace, because you know the trend of Stockpile by now. Bullseye Ace. Instead of for every skill equipped in the Hitman branch, handguns receive an accuracy bonus of 5%. Nobody knows what an accuracy bonus is, so let's just replace that with, for every skill equipped in the Hitman branch, hold 7.5% more handgun ammo. Which, maximum of 90% extra handgun ammo if you ace every single skill in the tree. Before I move on to what I do with Stockpile, obviously, I'm going to move on to Quick Draw for a bit, which is basically just making the skill universal. Your weapon swap speed increases by 25%, and your ADS speed increases by 25%. Ace version is increasing those bonuses to 70%. And Stockpile, handgun... I am going to replace this skill with Locked and Loaded, which is sort of an old skill from the original system. Ammo pickups are added directly to the magazine of your unequipped weapon. If the magazine is full, the ammo will be added to reserves. Reload handguns while sprinting. And the Ace version is the last shot of your magazine will deal double damage. It's a universal skill because if you're speccing into something like a handgun, handguns are primarily going to be used for killing marked enemies, and that's sort of how it is. But none of the skills aside from spatial awareness and bounty hunter really play into that. So let's just go ahead and make the other skills in the handgun tree universal, including Cheap Trick. So for Cheap Trick, I'm changing the Ace version to when you shoot an enemy in the body, they suffer the same damage as if it were a headshot. Body shots will also trigger any skill that requires a headshot. So something like needing to get a headshot. I know this is not in the current system, but getting a headshot to refresh your edge with the old sharpshooter skill line, something like that, you wouldn't even need to hit the head anymore. So any skill that requires getting a headshot, if you get this skill, it basically would negate that. Flashpoint doesn't actually have that many changes aside from the two obvious. Changing Shine On Ace, the range of flashbang grenades increases by 4% for every skill equipped in the Flashpoint branch, that's fine. Adding on to that, you carry one additional flashbang grenade for every 2 skills in the Flashpoint branch. Because Stockpile Flashbangs, I'm replacing this one with High Marks, except changed a little bit. Take 4% less damage for each marked enemy within 10 meters up to a cap of 40%. That's basically what the skill is now. So I'm going to be changing the aced version, which is changing to, you can now manually mark up to 5 targets at once, and all your marks last 40% longer. This is also so it can synergize with... It's also to have it synergize a lot more with the Hitman tree and spatial awareness, but also very useful for stealth, because you're going to be using the imposter tree in stealth one way or another, so it may as well be on the same page as stealth skills, so you can mark enemies a lot more consistently. Lastly, on to Professional, this one is going to have Pill Pusher, which is fine. The medic bags are the only deployable that I would not change to have your first charge be what the aced version of the skill is, because with medic bags, it's a lot more fun to have you just place it down and then have everybody else worry about getting themselves healed up, because you're going to need to be in that bad situation anyway. May as well not need to go through that extra step with medic bags compared to the other ones, because really the reason to have the other ones be a first and free charge thing is so that you can put them down sooner. Medic bags are much more of a put them down when you need them type of deployable. Long shot though, not too many changes, but the ones that are there are significant. So I'm going to be treating this similarly to the shotgunner tree, where I am not adding a replacement to stockpile, because it doesn't need one. Marksman rifles are ammo neutral at worst. So, stockpile sniper, for the last time,
Get rid of it.
I'm replacing this with precision shot, which is the distance it takes for marksman rifles to suffer damage drop-off doubles while aiming down sights, and the ace version applies it to all firearms, so that it gives you a much more of a reason to ADS, and also a way to counter-snipe with more weapons than just a sniper. So I'm changing Skull Trauma to headshots deal 15% more damage, period, with any weapon. It doesn't really matter what weapon it is, that's kind of the big benefit of it, but to keep it as a marksman skill, I am also adding marksman rifles are not affected by distance penalties on headshots. And the increased reload speed by 20% is just, make that universal for all weapons instead of just marksman rifles. Lastly, return policy. When you land a headshot, one bullet will return to your magazine. This ability has a 4-second cooldown, and Ace changes the cooldown to 2 seconds. This is something that will not have much of an effect, being universal, because a lot of people are not going to use it on anything that doesn't only spend one bullet to kill something anyway. So realistically, it's universal just for the sake of ease, to make sure that everything can use it. For the sake of consistency more than anything else. Because realistically, it's only ever going to be used on shotguns, because it only ever restores one bullet every 2 seconds, and for something that spends bullets as quickly as an SMG, it's not going to matter. But it's also going to be nice for something like the Deagle or the 500 Magnum. Sidearms like that. That's where it's also going to be very useful. And Cutthroat, I only really have one thing I'd change here. This is actually fun. I find it funny how this is the one that I have the least amount of changes actually in, aside from the rearrangement. So, Knife Expert Aced. For every skill equipped in the Cutthroat branch, throwing knives will penetrate one enemy and hit whatever is behind them. That's what the skill does now, but I'm adding on to that, if your throwing knife hits a wall, it will not break. Because that's something that a lot of people don't like, is when throwing knives go through like 10 enemies and they have no idea where it went because it broke and they don't know what to do with it, and they just gotta pick up another one. This is a way to circumvent that, but it's also something that you would also want to completely avoid in stealth, because, if a guard finds a knife, they immediately go into searching. But, it's something that a lot of people don't like, and it's something that existed in the old skill system, so I figure, let's bring it back. There's not really any harm in it. It's something a lot of people don't like anyway. So, yeah. But overall, that's the exhaustive list of what I would change in the current Skills 2.0 system. It didn't really matter that I was recording this before the patch where they added a cap onto head games and Machine War, but because those are getting, they're getting caps, and that's not really the point of this. The major point of this is to go over things that would change the existence of the stockpile skills, which there's 9 of those things. We don't need 9 of those things when 7 of them can be replaced. Like, there could have been 10, but somebody decided Knife Expert had to be the smart one and the only reasonable one, because I guess they thought of Laceration first and didn't want to put Stockpile and Knives, and they're just like, how do we make it work? So really, I hate the Stockpile skills. Just make them how Knife Expert works. That's really the big message of that. But the other things that we're really trying to emphasize here is synergy between the pages, specifically the latter 3, and reasons to side climb. And, making it so that your weapons are not too special. Like, they're still specialized, but they're not exceptionally specialized, because I'm not changing anything with the base skill to make it so that you can still spec into that weapon when you really want to use it, especially with adding the ammo economy onto the tier 1 skill, so that you have even more incentive to build even more into the tree. But it doesn't also screw you out of having a good primary and secondary instead of giving good primary or secondary. Yeah, overall, that's kind of what I wanted to say about Skills 2.0 and all that I would change in it. Hopefully this video comes out after the February patch, so Starbreeze can start working on adding some of these in, because a lot of people probably would enjoy this. Like, I don't want to toot my own horn or anything, but this is something that I've had on my mind for a while, and I've wanted to talk about it. So I'm glad to get it off my chest, at least. But yeah, I do appreciate you guys watching this, so thanks for coming by, and I hope you take care.